Award-winning futurist, researcher, and keynote speaker Nikolas Badminton joining us on Canada Now. And Nick, look, I'm in my mid-40s, so I'm pleading with you. Will we be able to prevent aging in humans within the next 2 decades?
You're asking the wrong person, I think, Jeff. But like, if we look out there, so this has been a hotly sort of debated topic for the past few decades. Everyone wants to live forever. This idea of longevity or immortality is sort of been on the tip of the tongue for many people in the future design field and technology and healthcare fields as well. So what's interesting over the past, I'd say, sort of decade, there's been a lot of discussions around, I want to live to be 130 years old. We're already living twice as long as we would like 200 years ago. So why can't we just? I think I saw one of these big investors like, eventually we'll be living for twice as long. So it's like, okay, so that means 140, 150 years old. It's not that simple, but there's a lot of teams out there looking at technologies, looking at how we can sort of work with our genetic makeup to interfere the process of aging and create longevity and the longevity market as a whole. And I was chatting to a great friend of mine called Oksana about this. She does biohacking and whatever. And she was saying that, the longevity market could be worth over like $20 trillion by 2030. Because, that's everything from preventative healthcare through to, wanting to live longer and whatever. And, Silicon Valley and beyond, all the ultra wealthy, they don't want to die, Jeff. They want to live forever. So there's this thing. So, there's some interesting research out there.
Yeah. Well, and a lot has to do, and I think you touched on it there, with cellular rejuvenation. Like that seems to be where scientists are going with, hey, you want to live longer? That's the way to do it.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, as we advance in age, it's actually the ability of the body to self regenerate itself that causes aging, or the lack thereof.
Right.
So people that are older, you can see, there's cellular degeneration and muscle entropy and losing hair. Actually, losing hair is just something that's more testosterone than anything, Jeff, as I well know. Anyway, but like, but like, so it's basically, regenerative gene technologies are like a big focus area. Like if we can sort of interrupt that and we can work out how to develop therapies, then ultimately, we could be 100 and 120, but not look like we're 100, 120, look like we're 40 or 50 years old. And I think it's kind of partly exciting and disruptive, but it's also, really, there's a lot of questions behind, who's going to be able to afford it? When would you do that? When would you not do that? There's a lot of ethical, moral decisions that need to be made.
Right. And so it would be looking at not only extending our lives, but enriching the quality of them as well. There's a lab that you sent me a story on, Altos Labs, that seem to be all in on making all of this happen, getting scientists who specialize in this sort of thing to work for them. And their scientists have been able to reverse signs of aging in mice. They lived 30% longer, and that's the equivalent of 35 human years. So, for those that are thinking, okay, this might be a pie-in-the-sky thing that happens a long time from now, as you mentioned, the industry and how it could be a booming industry in this very decade, this could happen sooner rather than later.
Well, it's interesting, Jeff, as well. And if we start human trials, you certainly have to wait a long time for the evidence, right? So suddenly, like you and I, we have this therapy. You have to literally like run a set of tests over the next 50 to 70 years with both of us. So it's kind of a slow burn just in terms of how it works. I'm always fascinated when like dog years or mice years versus human years. But it's been long used as a comparison, right?
Yeah.
But when it does go to human trials, these therapies are interesting, but they're only really going to catch fire big time after about 50 or 60 years, potentially, right? So this is good futures speculation stuff. But what you'll be able to see in the meantime is the regeneration of cells. If over the next 10 to 20 years, it's slowed down or the regeneration is speeded up by these sort of impacts with this gene technology that they've developed. So, the promise is there. At what point do you monetize this and offer it as a solution? I think that's going to be hotly debated, because, does it work? Does it not work? Where's the evidence? I think a lot of very, very wealthy people will be happily step up and be like, you know what? I'm going to give you like $15 million for this revolutionary technology, and then just see, if this works or not.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of the rich, it's a big mystery as to who is behind, mentioning Altos Labs, who is behind their work. Like, some believe it's Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, and given they have an initial budget of $2.94 billion, it's a pretty good guess.
Well, there's a lot of very wealthy people out there, Jeff, right? I mean, access to billions of dollars and whatever. There's not just Jeff Bezos. I mean, there's lots of people that do a lot of different things. It's always interesting when there's this air of mystique, but the reason they keep it so vague and it's so mysterious is because this is potentially very, very valuable intellectual property, right? So you want to keep things very quiet, and you don't want people to know, because keeping things in the shadows, Jeff, it's going to be it's important.
Well, look, I mean, there is something to it. Like, what if you could pay X amount of dollars to live for another 30 years? I mean, can a number even be put on that if you know that you can extend your life by 3 decades?
Yeah, it's interesting if you're thinking about pricing of this, right?
Yeah.
In the early stages of this technology, and there's a lot of people using stem cell technology and a bunch of different stuff to play with this already. They'll be willing, if you're ultra wealthy, dropping a few $1 million isn't necessarily difficult, right?
I think in knowing you as I do, I think if this lab came to you and said, "Look, we need a human for this. We're pretty sure it's going to work, and we'll let you. We'll test it on you, and we're not going to charge you anything, but we're pretty confident that this is going to work. But it's not a sure thing. I'll bet you'd say yes to it."
Do you know what I'd do, Jeff? I'd say, I've got this really great friend of mine called Jeff Sammut, and I think that it would be interesting for both he and I to do this. And do you know what, Jeff? When we're 140 years old and everyone else that we know is gone, and we're still doing this show, there's unlimited opportunity for us in that new world.
We'll be celebrating our 100th anniversary of our weekly talk on SiriusXM. Yeah, I think we would both be taking like the medication or running through the tests or whatever, and after a couple of days they'd be like, well, one subject seems to be reacting just fine, but the other one, his hair is clearly getting more gray and his nose seems to be getting bigger. No, actually, he looked like that before, unfortunately.
Do you know what, Jeff? At that point, I've got a distinct feeling that I'm just going to be one of those floating heads in like the jar, like in Futurama.
That's right. And we talked about your funeral and what we were going to do when you die. We were going to put you in a rocket and shoot you up into space. So maybe it would be your headless body that we would shoot up into space.
Exactly. And I can watch my own body funeral, but I live forever.
Check out NikolasBadminton.com, futurist researcher and keynote speaker Nikolas Badminton. Always a pleasure, my friend. We'll do it again next week.
Live long and prosper, Jeff.